Puddle Lane. Never trust dragons. Never trust dragons. Tessa was a little cat who lived in Puddle Lane. One fine day, Tessa went to see the magician, who lived in the big house at the end of the lane. She climbed up the tree and jumped down onto the roof. She ran up the roof to the skylight and looked down into the magician's room. Tessa looked down. The magician was out. At first, Tessa thought that the room was empty, but then she saw a little puff of smoke coming out of the cage on the table. The dragon is there, she said to herself, but he's safely in his cage. I'll go and see. I will go and see the dragon, said Tessa. Tessa climbed down the pole that was propped against the wall. She ran across to the table and jumped up onto it. There was the dragon's cage. The dragon was lying inside it. His eyes were shut. He was fast asleep. He was breathing out puffs of smoke. The little dragon was fast asleep. Tessa took a step nearer. The dragon woke up. He opened one eye and looked at her. Tessa jumped back. The little dragon lifted his head. Don't be afraid of me, he said. I wouldn't hurt you. The magician put me in here because I wanted to eat a mouse. There's nothing wrong in eating mice, is there? The dragon woke up. He opened one eye. He saw Tessa. No, said Tessa, but you mustn't eat the mice who live in the garden. We've all promised not to do that. I've promised too, said the dragon, but the magician still won't let me out, and I'm so stiff. Do you think that you could undo the catch on the door so that I could just come out and fly once around the room? I'd fly straight back to the cage, and you could shut the door again. Please let me out. Let me out, said the little dragon. The little dragon looked so miserable that Tessa felt sorry for him. Will you promise to fly straight back to the cage? She asked. Of course I will, said the dragon. Then I'll let you out for just 1 minute, said Tessa. She jumped on top of the cage. She pressed the catch and let the dragon out. Tessa let the dragon out. The dragon flew up into the air. He breathed out fire and he breathed out smoke. He swung around and flew straight at Tessa, breathing out smoke and fire. Tessa didn't wait to talk about promises. She leapt right off the table into an empty box that was standing on the floor, and she pulled down the lid with a bang. The dragon flew out. He flew at Tessa. Tessa jumped into a box. The dragon flew down onto the box. He was just going to pull up the lid when he heard the magician coming. The magician came in. The magician came in. The dragon flew out of the open window. The magician ran across the room. Come back, he shouted. Come back! But the dragon flew on. Tessa heard the magician calling. She looked out of the box. Oh, said Tessa. She was very frightened. The dragon flew out of the open window. Tessa looked out of the box. The magician turned around and saw her. Oh, Tessa, he said, what have you been doing? I let out the dragon, said Tessa, and I'm very sorry, but he promised to fly back into his cage again. Never trust dragons, said the magician. Dragons never keep their promises. Never trust dragons, said the magician. The little dragon flew down onto the garden wall. He saw Mr. Go-to-Bed sitting in the lane. Mr. Go-to-Bed was fast asleep with a newspaper over his face. The dragon flew down. He breathed out fire and he breathed out smoke. Mr. Go-to-Bed's newspaper began to burn. The little dragon saw Mr. Go-to-Bed. Mr. Go-to-Bed was fast asleep. Mr. Go-to-Bed woke up in a fright. He saw the newspaper burning. He threw off the newspaper and jumped to his feet. He stamped out the fire. The little dragon flew off down Puddle Lane. Mr. Go-to-Bed didn't see him. He went into his house and made himself a cup of tea. Then he went to bed to get over the shock. Mr. Go-to-Bed woke up. The little dragon flew over the rooftops. He looked down and saw Hari and Davy. Hari and Davy were in the garden at the back of Davy's house. They had a big tin bath full of water and they were sailing paper boats in it. The little dragon flew down like an arrow. He breathed out fire and he breathed out smoke. All the paper boats went up in flames. The little dragon saw Hari and Davy. He flew down. Harry picked up a bucket of water. He threw it over the dragon. The water turned into a cloud of steam, and the dragon was very wet. The dragon was very wet. The dragon was very angry too. He shook off the water and flew back over the rooftop and down into Puddle Lane. I'll burn a house down, he said to himself. I'll burn a house down if it takes me all day. The dragon looked across Puddle Lane and he saw Mr. Puffle. Mr. Puffle was watering his flowers. The dragon looked down Puddle Lane. He saw Mr. Puffle. The dragon flew down to Mr. Puffle's front door. He breathed out fire and he breathed out smoke. The door began to burn. Mr. Puffle looked down. He saw the dragon. He picked up a flower pot and dropped it on the dragon's head. Mr. Puffle looked down. He saw the dragon. The flower pot hit the little dragon so hard that it knocked him out. Mr. Puffle went downstairs. He found the dragon lying in the lane and he picked him up. I'll tie you up before you have a chance to do any more damage, said Mr. Puffle. You can light my fire for me every day and save me a lot of trouble. The little dragon didn't say anything. He didn't hear Mr. Puffle. He was still knocked out. Mr. Puffle picked up the dragon. Mr. Puffle took the little dragon into his back garden. He put a dog collar around the dragon's neck and he fastened a chain to it. When the little dragon opened his eyes, he found himself chained up. The little dragon opened his eyes. So the little dragon lived at Mr. Puffle's house. Mr. Puffle kept him chained up in the garden all day, but every morning he took him inside to light the fire. So the little dragon was very useful to Mr. Puffle, and he had to stay in Mr. Puffle's garden for a very long time. The little dragon lit Mr. Puffle's fire for him.